Wait to go live here. Okay, we'll start again. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to, first we'll do a Source Protection Authority meeting at 9:30 this morning, and then we will switch into a regular meeting. I will just give the regular notes at the beginning of the meeting so everybody's aware. As a reminder, Emily Chandler is serving as our meeting host. So if those of you online have connection problems or issues with technology, please contact Emily through the chat feature. Harj and Peter are joining us online today. We do have regrets from Jim and Debbie. So we'll see them at the next meeting. Imagine. And today's meeting is being live streamed through the UTRCA's YouTube channel. And just a reminder to please refrain from whispers or side conversations while the meeting is running, as they could get picked up by the microphones. The squares up here show red when the microphones are muted and green when they're on. So they are on, and again, they're very sensitive. And we are live streaming. So with that, we will move right into the Upper Thames River Source Protection Authority meeting, which is scheduled for today at 9:30. And I'll ask if there's any modifications for the agenda. Seeing none, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I don't believe we have any presentations or delegations. And so we'll move into administrative business 4.1. Is there a mover for the recommendations for the minutes? Skylar and Scotty the second. Discussion of that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Okay, and then we'll move into section 5.1, which is ratification of Source Protection Strike Committee member. You can see from the background there that Sandy was nominated. And this is more of a formality to make sure that happens. So is there a mover of are any questions of the report? Two? Is there a mover? Skylar? Mark. There we go. Right there. Discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Still haven't had copies. Okay, and then we'll move into 5.2, and I believe we have a presentation on this report from Julie, and so I'll call her forward to make her presentation. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I did talk with Michelle last week just to make sure to see if any board members didn't get the Source Protection Program 101 last year. And we think everyone got that. So if you didn't, if you did miss it, if you have any questions, please just follow up with me and I'm happy to answer any questions. So today will be a very quick presentation. It's really just under the Clean Water Act, we're mandated to provide an update on what's happening in the Sydenham Source Protection region. So this presentation is really going to be about the data that we've collected and kind of the analysis that we can provide for you. So next slide, please. So under the Clean Water Act, the Source Protection Authority shall annually prepare an annual progress report and submit it to the Director of Ministry or Environment and Conservation Parks and the Source Protection Committee. So this report has two things. It needs to describe the measures that have been taken to implement the source protection plans and to describe the extent to which the objectives set out in the source protection policies are being achieved. So the deadline for this is April 1st. This is our 8th annual reporting round. So we have gone to the Source Protection Committee a few weeks ago. So next stop is the Upper Thames Source Protection Authority, and then on Thursday will be the St. Clair and the Lower Thames Source Protection Authority. Next slide, please. So under the Clean Water Act, it needs to be reviewed by the Source Protection Committee. So after receiving the report, the authorities and the Source Protection Committee shall review the report, and that should be provided in your package, and provide feedback and approve or have follow-up questions at that point. Next slide, please. Okay, so we do this. So we have all of the implementers need to provide their data into our electronic annual reporting. And the implementers are all the municipalities in the Thames Sydenham region, all of the ministries that have policies under our plan. that they are mandated to abide by. So we ask them to provide all of their responses by February 1st. So it gives us time to analyze the data and roll it up to your, this committee and the others. Next slide, please. So it provides two separate reports. We have our public facing report, which will go on all the websites. And that report will be submitted to the ministry, and also the supplemental form. And that's where all the data comes from. So if you have any questions in the public facing report, you have the supplemental form you can dig through and kind of find out why numbers are why they are. Next slide, please. Okay, so in our region, we've broken out our policies. So Oxford County, back in the day, before Clean Water Act was approved, they were always way ahead of the game with source water protection. They have a lot of wood stock. There's a lot of their communities are on well water. So they have their own policies, and they have a total of 80 policies, but the rest of our region, the Thames-Sydenham region, we have 94 policies. And those policies are all made up of significant policies, which are legally binding and non-legally binding policies. So the next slides will be kind of reviewing how we are doing with all those policies. Next slide, please. Okay, so for our significant drinking water policies, so these are the legally binding policies. We have about 80 or 85% implementation on all of those policies, which is great. When we're looking through all of the data, we're finding that some of the municipalities, there's a handful of them that haven't updated their official plans and zoning bylaws yet to incorporate the source protection policies and mapping. And that's primarily due to they're waiting on the provincial policy statements and changes to Bill 103 and all the other subsequent bills before they completed those OPs and zoning bylaws. So then 15% is in progress, so not too bad. We're happy with that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the moderate to low drinking water threat activity policies, those are the non-legally binding, so not maybe quite the priority for a lot of the municipalities, but there is a 50% implementation rate for those policies and another 50% in progress. So that was expected. Next slide, please. Okay, so for any of the other permitted policies, we're at 67% progress and 33% in progress. And those are primarily like with transport pathways, and transport pathways is one of those things that are man-made conduits to our groundwater. So it could be like boreholes or improperly decommissioned wells where pathogens and chemicals can get into our drinking water. And we are finding that municipalities, because of changeover with staffing, we're not hearing a lot about transport pathways, and they're supposed to let us know through planning applications. So we are going to do a follow-up with municipalities and kind of give them a 101 of what's the process and how you need to make sure you're incorporating source water into your day-to-day review of your applications. Next slide, please. Okay, so for risk management plans, these are the negotiated plans with landowners and businesses. This is where we make sure that any threat to our drinking water ceases to become a threat. So in this reporting year, and again, this reporting year, I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, is all of 2023. So we've had 20 risk management plans negotiated this year, and that brings us to a total of 101 with our region. Next slide, please. Okay, so our section 59 notices, there's a lot of zeros on this chart, so it tells me a few things. So section 59 is where the municipalities through planning and building permits, they're supposed to loop in source water protection through that process. So anytime an application comes across their desk, they need to vet it. Is this in a vulnerable area? And we need to pull in the Source Protection Authority staff. So we're not seeing a lot of those notices. You can see all of those notices are coming from Oxford County. So again, this tells me there's been so much staffing turnover that we need to go back out and do a workshop or roadshow of what this process is. And on the other side, the one of those reviews turned into a risk management plan. Next slide, please. So inspections, we have to go out inspection. This is the compliance part of the program. So for section 59, this is where existing threats are prohibited. We haven't had any this year, so in the last reporting year, so those are 0. And then for section 58, again, those are your risk management plans. that's when our risk management officials go out and make sure that those landowners' businesses are complying with what is within their negotiated risk management plan. So there was 33 of those inspections last year. Next slide. Okay, so when we're looking at our official plans and zoning bylaws for our region, for the whole Thames and Sydenham region, we have 17 municipalities that require to incorporate source protection plans and mapping into their OPs. And 21 are required to do the same thing for the zoning bylaw. So the numbers, so OP conformity exercise, only 9 of the 17 have complied, and 5 out of the zoning bylaw have complied. So again, a lot of these municipalities are telling us they're waiting to do a big bulk change with their OPs and zoning bylaws. So we're hoping now that things are going to settle out a little bit, that this will happen next year or the next couple of years. Next slide, please. Okay, signage. So for last year, we had 5 signs that were put on municipal roads. I suspect those are signs that were taken out with snowplows during the winter. So because all of those signs really should be in place. And those signs are really, everyone's seen them along the road. They kind of do 2 things. They act as education, like what does that sign mean? Let's Google it. But it's also, those signs are really important. If there's an accident on the roads, then EMS, they'll see those signs and they'll know, oh, we're in a source protection or vulnerable area. So we need to take that extra level of caution when we're doing a cleanup. And we have a total of 167 signs in our region. Next slide, please. Okay, septic inspections. We have 143 septic septic systems located in 7 municipalities, and they have a mandatory inspection program for every 5 years. There's 23 of those that are outstanding, primarily in St. Mary's. So we will be working with them, and this priority changes and staff turnover and a lot of things happening as a result that leads to that 23, but we will be working with them to get that number down. Next slide, please. Drinking water issues. We have one that's in Woodstock. They have a couple well fields, the Tabor well field and the Thornton well field. They both have elevated rates of nitrates in their water, which is not something that we want to see. So Tabor has an issue contributing area delineated for it, which just means you have your wellhead protection area delineated and you kind of grow that delineation line just to try to capture extra property that could be contributing to that nitrate issue. So now we're doing the same thing for the Thornton or the Thornton well field. So we're going through that process right now to try to bring those levels back down. Next slide, please. So the enumerated threats table. So this table, we have a 9% progress, which is great. But this number will go down, it'll go up, it's going to fluctuate. So I feel like it's a little bit dated, and I think the ministry is looking at how do we capture this data and make it more modernized, because so much is changing with these numbers. So just to kind of walk you through it, the estimated number of significant drinking water threats at the beginning of the program was 1,058. So that was all desktop analysis. And then we went out and there was an additional 84 that was spotted on the landscape. So that was rolled into that total number. Then when risk management officials were going out to do a kind of a tertiary or more deeper level investigation, 617 no longer exist. And that could be because on the mapping, it shows a fuel tank, but when you go out on site, it's not actually a fuel tank or it's not there anymore. Or businesses are changing. So it could have been a mom pop auto shop, and now it's a flower boutique store that doesn't use chemicals or anything. That could be a threat to drinking water. And then 409 of the original numbers has been addressed through policy, and then 116 still need to be addressed. And there's a few municipalities that are still working, trying to chisel away at addressing those threats. But again, this number will fluctuate because businesses, landowners change, and the province has provided new technical rules. So now we're in the process of reviewing what do those technical rules mean. We now need to draft new policies, and then we have to go out in the landscape and identify those new threats. And there's a whole handful of new threats that we now have to go and address. So next slide, please. Okay, so the next couple slides is really just on the provincial prescribed instruments. They don't give us a whole lot of data on this, so I'll kind of give you the numbers and we'll go on, but these are the ministries that have source protection plan policies that they have to adhere to. So in last year, there was a total of 4 applications that went under review for the 4 ministries there, or departments of the ministries, and 0 went through any kind of condition, which I don't need to go into. Next slide, please. Okay, this shows a lot of zeros. So yeah, we're not sure what's happening, but they said there's 100% cumulative progress made on prescribed instruments. So happy with that.
Good job.
And next slide. I think this is the last slide. I'm not going to read this, but this is the message. This is the verbiage that the Source Protection Committee approved. This is what will be rolled up to the ministry. The Source Protection Committee is happy that things are progressing well. They understand, the current landscape with official plans and getting that work done. But in general, they're going to score it as progressing well and on target. And that is it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take any.
Sandy, as our current member last year, was there anything you'd like to add from the committee?
There is one matter that did come up from the Auditor General's report. And the Auditor General recommended that the province consolidate some of its water testing lab facilities and cease doing free water testing. So that was something that your Source Water Protection Board was very concerned about, and has actually sent a letter in to the government suggesting that, albeit it's 20 years since Walkerton, it's not really a good idea to put your guard down on something as significant as testing water. So, Julie, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll just add, we were doing these events, these best practices events in smaller communities, kind of pilot projects, to see, we're kind of breaking down the barriers for people to test their private drinking water. The Clean Water Act is really about municipal drinking water systems, but the province has asked us to kind of reach out a little bit, although we have no policies and whatever. So we were doing these events where we were making it so people could buy or get their bottles and then test their water and drop it off on a one-night event. And then there's this whole, we had a septic inspector there for if there's questions for those people. And we had this hydrogeologist, et cetera. And the turnout was incredible. The amount of people that were doing testing of their water. And there were some reports we've seen that have come back negative. So we're finding that a lot of people won't do it because it's just not convenient. But now if you're gonna have those landowners have to pay to get the testing, that's just gonna set it back even further. So a lot of source protection committees across Ontario are writing letters and strongly advocating against taking that away. So free water testing.
No, we had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, beyond synthetic and animal-based nitrate sources, like what other potential contaminants are there that would contribute to elevated nitrate levels?
Well, I think you've hit the 2 main ones. Yeah, I don't know what I think are hydro Gs here, but yeah, those are the 2 main ones. And in Woodstock, it's very agricultural based in that region. So yeah, that's what we think is contributing there. And also I should mention for the Thornton well field, it could be one of those things where this was something that happened a long time ago. Maybe there's a manure spill on a property a long time ago and it's just slowly making its way because there is a time of travel with the hydrogeology. So it could be like 25 years of travel and it's just starting to make its way to the drinking water system. And that's why we're starting to see those elevated numbers. So there wouldn't be too much we can do about it other than testing and doing them through the Safe Drinking Water Act and chemicals and whatever they do there. So yeah.
From an Oxford County Councilor standpoint, we get those reports. So what they do is they mix the wells together to make sure that the levels are under and in the safe. There's different there's arsenic issues as well in some other wells. So again, they have the protocols to make sure the water is going out safely, where they mix the wells together to make sure that everybody's not going to be poisoned or have any health issues that way. Further questions? Skylar.
How do we compare like the Source Protection Committee to other committees? Like, do you guys kind of check in with each other and benchmark? Another one?
Yes, we are a very tight-knit community, so we meet regularly. We have a lot of office hours where we're just come and ask questions. So yes, very, very closely knit group that we work with. How we compare, it is interesting that question was asked. Sandy had asked that at the last meeting. And it was a very good question because sometimes it is apples to oranges because our regions and across Ontario are so vast and so different. So for instance, the area of Guelph and Waterloo, they only get their water from the ground. So they have so many more threats on the landscape that they have to manage. Like we had 1,058 to start, they had 10,000. So it is very different. So to compare where we're all at in the process, it is very different. I will say for us, we are doing well because I think we have a benefit of having a source protection, the risk management office here. So we have staff that can go out on behalf that have been delegated to municipalities and do the work. So they're getting that work done. Whereas some municipalities, that's not always a priority. And their priorities have shifted elsewhere. So that work maybe is not getting done. So it's very hard to compare. A very good question. Yeah.
Other questions?
Just a comment, Tim Center's new to being, or sourcing, services through Upper Thames, and I appreciate the work that was done to bring us, up to speed and, you know, in such a quick fashion, so thank you.
I think that's an important note that the province does provide 100% funding for the plan, but then through category 2 agreements, the authority can provide those risk management services to the different municipalities if they don't have expertise in-house. So it is an important partnership there to protect their drinking water. Further questions? Heather?
I just wanted to compliment you because that's a lot of policies to track.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if there's no more questions, thank you very much. And I will ask if there's a mover for the recommendation for the report. Anna and Sandy. Discussion. I would say that this is a good example of the cross ministerial responsibilities that the authorities have. Normally we're in MNRF, but this is a MECP responsibility to the Clean Water Act. So again, it is 100% funded through the province, which is very much appreciated. It's a very important topic. But it is, again, those risk management services are available through the Conservation Authority to help the municipalities out in making sure that everything is being proceeded to make it as safe as possible. There's always going to be risks out there. Again, I do want to commend the province for 100% funding this. This is something that we see once a year, but there's important work going on and behind the scenes at all times. And unfortunately, Walkerton had to happen to bring in some really good changes to make sure that we do have some of the safest drinking water in all the world. And I commend the committee for making sure that they try to make sure that happens. It keeps on happening, and it just makes sense to have. You know, you want to know your water's safe. There shouldn't be barriers there based off financial needs to be able to make sure that's happening. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. If there's any reports for information, and with that, we're at the end of the agenda. Is there a mover to adjourn? Anna and Sandy? Oh, sorry. Skylar?
You can have one.
Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Thanks very much. And we are adjourned with that meeting. And now we'll go right into, I will call the regular meeting of the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Board of Directors, April meeting to order at 9:54. And we'll start with the territorial knowledge. We'll begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples, who have longstanding relationships to the land, water, and regions of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nations of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation at Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations, all the original peoples. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary, are there any modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Very well, we'll now move to administrative business, which is a approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Paul? Scotty, second? Discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Are there any business items of the minute? Seeing none, do you believe we have any correspondence? But we do have a presentation delegation from the City of London. So we'll go to that and welcome to our guests.
Thanks. That's great. Okay.
We have lots of voices. Okay, thanks for having us here today. I'm Shauna Chambers, Manager of Stormwater Engineering. Perhaps you all know Scott Mathers, Deputy City Manager of Planning and Economic Development, also former Stormwater Manager. We come here to talk about one of our passion projects, the Mud Creek Channel Rehabilitation. We wanted to come here today just to express to the board just how important this project is to the city, and also how much investment that we're putting in here for not only the environment, flood protection, and to support infill development to meet the housing challenges that are rising in many cities. So we just wanted to give a precursor of why and kind of give you some photos and visuals of how this project is really quite impactful. This first photo shows us the flooding at Oxford Street, and if you know London at all, this is right near the Fleetway Bowling Center. So it's quite a prominent location we all know of, but it also floods every 2 to 5 years. This photo is from 2014. It's also flooded in 2018 as well as 2021. As dramatic as seeing LTC videos of buses going through the intersection and filling up with water on TikTok. So imagine your horror when you're sitting on the couch during the pandemic and I'm seeing buses filling with water on Oxford. So it was the project's coming. Next slide. This is just from a different angle, but I can't stress enough, more education on please don't drive through water when you don't know the depth of it. But anyway, so that's looking towards Proudfoot. And again, that's kind of the precursor for this project. Next slide. So we look at the aerial photo and we see that's the flood prone area near the Fleetway Bowling. And then we see this CN rail culvert, which is really the crux of the issue. And we have just, we're looking at some old reports, Scott and I, 1987 flooding report said, can you please install 2 twin 2,700 millimeter culverts out of that location. In 1987, it was identified. And in 2020, we ended up putting them in. So very exciting. We finally got back together. There was a lot of studies, a lot of modeling done in this area. And just the course of time, it's a pretty complex project to actually get in the ground when you're working with CN. So challenging soil conditions, a lot of technical issues. Slide, please. So we see here, though, this culvert's been there since 1922 aerial photography. So that's over 100 years old. And also was designed, of course, for just agricultural lands. It didn't take into account the Cherry Hill Mall area, all of the towers we see today. So it was very exciting to get this project done. We have Mr. Mathers there standing beside the old culvert, which was a brick culvert lined with a steel. So the capacity was even further reduced over time. And you can see it's about chest high. Next slide. So when we did the EA and we finished it in 2017, we said we really need to improve flood conveyance. We need to reduce the flood risk predominantly at that intersection, as well as reduce flooding into properties in the area as well. A few had already been draft plan approved back in the 80s to proceed to development. So we wanted to be able to do all 3 through this project. Of course, we've also recently adopted, and just for the benefit of the group, the complete corridor approach. It's the movement of stormwater, wildlife, and people. So when we are coming through with new subdivisions, we want people to have access to nature. So it's not just a concrete jungle. Of course, during the pandemic, we saw how much it's important for people's mental health to walk in nature and to be exposed to nature. So we're trying to bring that to the urban areas as we develop. Very important to us as part of this project as well. Slide. So this was the installation of the culvert. It was very intensive. It was trenchlessly designed. If you've ever seen that before, you need two giant, basically concrete chambers to put this equipment in and then to send through underneath the sand rail. So that's $7.5 million just to get the two culverts in. And then if you hit the slide again, we basically went from one chest-high culvert to two human-sized culverts, and that's where we can really get the flow out of there quickly. So it's a nice tangible way to see how much larger those really are. And we have them offset, so during low flow, only one is activated, and during high flow, they're both activated. So now downstream of that, of course, we had to increase capacity because you can't just open up the channels and not culverts and not have channel capacity. So we also undertook a rehabilitation of the channel, which made it 60-meter wide corridor to convey the floodwaters. A lot of invasive species. These woodlots, the quality are very lacking because they're just left unmaintained and just since the agricultural days left to do what have you. Like there hasn't been any organization to them. So there was a lot of buckthorn, there was a lot of subpar kind of trees in there. And when we planted all back with native species, we're just so excited to see it give like a full fresh start. These really are legacy projects. So we find we're taking out mature trees, but we're really creating a healthy environment for a sustainable future. And that's why we're so excited about these projects. Slide, please. So that's the project as it sits today, or a couple of years ago, I should say. And a lot of times with our channels, we like to make them, you know, wind and weave, but here it's just so flat. We couldn't achieve that. But you'll see we also had a wetland feature recreated as well, which was previously just a buckthorn mess. So this will continue to let nature take its course and let everything flourish. Next slide, please. So that's a wetland that we recreated as well. So when we're doing these projects, the engineers were working hand in hand with the ecologists. We're working with fluid geomorphologists, like the river specialists, and we're working with landscape architects. So it's all being done in a very sustainable way. So coming soon, phase 2, we're working with AECOM, and that's a project we're going to be tendering this spring, working with Upper Thames through this process, through getting this 2-zone flood approach is very important to our phase 2 project, because we're taking it from the CN problem area all the way to Oxford Street, and that's over 700 meters of channel reconstruction, similar to the part that you just saw. But it will include a pedestrian pathway. So that's what we're bringing the people to the corridor for all the apartments that are already there and the future housing development to happen north of Oxford. So it's extremely exciting. Slide. And this next section is expected to be another $10 million. So the first phase was about 10 now. This is all 11.5 for this next phase. So substantial investment. But again, to bring the housing online and to support the rapid transit corridor from flooding, and bring people to nature. So it's kind of that trifecta. Slide. So this is where we talk about this slide you'll see in your package. This was the one that talks about the 2-zone concept area. So we're taking it, if people are familiar with the previous mini putt lands, the mini putt will be redeveloping as well. It's trying to come in for rezoning to develop. So we've toggled in a few properties there where there may be opportunities within the 2-zone to have development in the fringe, because they are very shallow water, very slow moving water is what effectively a fringe is. And then of course, protecting the floodway within the channel we're creating. There's just a bit of overspill from the channel is what we're seeing. So that's the area that we're looking to come in for future applications to the Upper Thames to allow for development within the fringe. You'll see the area in gray there is the future subdivision that's underway in the design process. And they're going to reconstruct and continue the channel all the way to the CP rail, which will create 2 kilometers of trail for folks to be having access to. But 3,800 units, if you know those who follow it, London has a target of 47,000 units. And when you look at this whole area, it's probably about 10% can be covered off in this infill area, which is super important to keeping our urban growth boundary contained, but also just to support the infill targets that London has for 45% growth. Next slide. So it's really the benefits, I touched on it, but definitely climate change adaptation at its finest, really putting the investment in, doing the good work to do that, to reduce flood risk and create ecological habitat. So another adaptation feature. The health and well-being is personal passion of mine to give people these avenues to access nature that's right nearby out their doorstep. And that intensification piece, of course. Slide.
So with that, I was gonna jump in, just that the segue for the intensification of the 45%. That of course is built into our official plan, and we really want to be able to achieve that target. And to do that, we need to have great projects and areas to be able to develop. And this Mud Creek work and what you had before you today is very critical for us to be able to achieve those targets. So I'm sure you're all very well aware of the housing emergency that the province, the country is experiencing right now. So we're committed to be able to be bringing forward accelerating housing. And this is one of those pieces of housing that we're really excited about. And it's going to take new ideas and increased efficiency to be able to do that. So what you have before you today is also, it's not a brand new idea, but it's very new to London and a different approach. It's having this 2-zone concept. And again, that's possibly something that we'll be using in other areas in the future as well. But this will be the first time. So this is really great that Tracy and her team brought this forward, and we're very excited about it. As mentioned by Shauna as well, we're looking for a substantial amount of housing over and above the 3,800, could be 4,000 or more homes in this area. And it's something that we really need for our community and something that we're trying to support as well. Also just wanted to highlight that urgency, that action, like there's a huge need right now. We have some very dedicated teams, I know at the Conservation Authority and at the city to try to make these things happen, but we really do need to ensure that we're moving these things forward as quickly and mindfully as possible. As Shauna also mentioned, there's been work done on Mud Creek for 40 years. We want to make sure that some of the other areas that we're doing that quickly, and we're making sure that we're doing it in a safe, mindful way, but doing it in a way that's going to bring that housing online as well. So, and in everything we do and at the city side, and then I'm sure at the Conservation Authority side, we just really want to focus on that floodplain mapping, importance of it. We want to ensure that that we're maintaining public safety, that we're providing orderly developments, and all of the work that the Conservation Authority and all of the partners are doing are going to be able to maintain that and ensure that happens. So this piece that you have before you today, it's a very, there's a lot of work that's gone behind it, and very excited and very happy that it's before you today, and a very important step for London if you choose to approve this report today. So with that, if we just hit the last slide, just very much from me and Shauna, I want to thank you for your support on this. And we're just saying we very much, there is an urgency to be able to move a lot of important work forward. So whatever you can do to help us and to achieve our objectives for our community, providing that housing in a very safe and mindful way, we very appreciated by the City Council and our staff of the city. So thank you very much, everybody, and thanks, Tracy, for this report and for the ongoing work that you're doing as well.
Well, thank you very much. And I will open up to questions from the board. I will ask that we refrain from comments. We do have a report to consider after this, but if you have any questions of the delegations, welcome those. Sandy.
So I'm pretty familiar with the area. Didn't have my picture. You did talk about it took decades, and I know the city approved it for development back in '86. But as I read it, a lot of the mistakes were made, like putting that pipe in the culvert. And I just wanted to be clear that it's an outlier in terms of development. I mean, 70 years ago was a swamp. So I just wanted to be clear in my own mind. The delays are not related to the work done here at the authority. Is that correct? I see you're nodding your head.
So you're absolutely correct. This is probably one of the most complex stormwater projects. There's a couple other that are very complex that have taken many, many years and a
lot of money, north of $30 million.
A lot of analysis, absolutely. Yeah. So it really is like a shared. There was work done before the shot, and I was on the file from the city side that maybe slowed some things down as well. So I don't think I wouldn't want to allocate and point at anybody as far as what the responsibilities for it. I just really want to focus on the urgency and moving this forward and all the great work that we have done in the past few years. And but very much a super complicated project, and I can't think of any more that would be more sophisticated than this one.
Thank you.
It's not big, but that was an interesting one too.
Tom and then him.
I'm just curious, because this is such a sophisticated project, what would be the financial mechanism to fund it? Like, is it a local improvement? Is it infrastructure? Obviously, you're kind of beyond the Drainage Act.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll just because I have this hat on as well in the past, a lot of this is funded from development charges. So it's a balance. We have to, whenever we're assessing a project for being able to be funded from those development charges, we have to assess whether there's a benefit to existing. So this project, each element has a different percentage, but a substantial portion it's from development charges, but also funded by the City of London as well.
I will add that the city of London has its own stormwater charge, so it's partially stormwater rates and partially DCs.
Anna?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and also thank you for the work. I know it's taken years and years to get where we are, and I want to thank the city as well as Upper Thames for that collaboration. I think this to me is a positive thing. You talked about the second stage that you're going into in the spring. What does that look like? And if everything goes forward, when can we expect opportunities to develop in this area? I know there's applications that will probably be coming forward as well to planning, but sort of just take me through a few steps going forward.
Sure. Yeah, the schedule for the project, if we're going to be tendering this spring to start in July, the fish windows, respecting those. So we intend to construct over 2 construction seasons because it's such a large project. But by 2026, folks would start building the 3rd phase of the channel that's heading north to CP. In the meantime, during that period, though, we will be working in parallel with the developers for the applications.
Yeah, and so those applications would come directly to council. So we're working with the development, the various developers in this area to bring that forward. So we're hoping that that's going to be in timely way and hopefully this year, and then we can start progressing the work. Absolutely. So and we have mandated timelines now, so that really does show that. Provide that urgency to move these things forward as well. So very likely to have all those applications throughout that area. Coming to council this year.
And just as a follow-up, with the flooding that's occurring there on Oxford Street, have we dealt with that flooding with the first stage, or how vulnerable are we still to flooding?
Currently, those twin culverts under the CN are not activated yet. The phase 2 project will connect up to those because they're not only are they larger, they're also 2 meters deeper, so 6 feet deeper. We had to do that phase first. Then when the channel comes in, it's going to drop down and fall into it. So we won't be relieved of flooding until 2025, roughly.
Sorry, if I can jump in
Let's
on
have
that.
Skylar first, then Sam.
Okay,
This
yeah.
is gonna be the same question I had, so that's fine.
Okay.
Related to flooding on Oxford? Wonderful.
Okay.
Give me my question.
Sandy?
I'm reading though, that even with the 2-zone concept, there is flows across Oxford Street at the 100-year storm.
That's extremely conservative, Sandy.
Okay.
That's all I want to say.
When I looked at the report, I
Conceptually-
thought I saw it.
Conceptually, it does show that in the report.
Yeah.
I will stand here today and say that's very conservative. I do not expect this road to flood.
Well, and even with the MTO, like there's design standards for like large like highways and such are 25 to 50 years for crossing. So for like a roadway like that, that's still a very good level of service. But as you said, there's some assumptions there that to make sure that it's conservative. So that's.
Yeah, and the good news is from a land use perspective, though, we still have it's very conservative in that sense. So we don't think it'll ever flood, but then things won't be built there either. So that's positive.
Excellent. Further questions? Tom, please.
Just with respect to your call to action, with this past budget, we implemented a more muscular planning department. Do you think that will address your concerns with respect to your call to action?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that can help as part of providing the focus that can actually go through those applications and Tracy and her team also been very good at making that service improvements. So that's something that is very, I think will be very helpful. Some of the things that are probably some of the larger critical for opening up and providing some additional housing is just ensuring that we have the right flood lines and ensuring that we've got climate change has been taken care of so that if we're providing new housing and new areas for development, that we've got that timely growth. So we're working very closely on them on a couple of major projects that will be very exciting when they move forward and any support that and I know that they're receiving substantial funding in your budget to support that area as well. So those are things that are very important to be able to move housing.
I think I just want to add that, we understand this time of, there's not a lot of personnel resources or financial resources at this time. So part of us coming here today, and I really wanted to show up as well, was just to show that we really are a partner with the Upper Thames and we want to be a trusted partner that we can work together and get things done as quickly but as safely as possible. So yeah, we just want to continue that dialogue and building that relationship. And I think if we work together on a common goal, we'll be able to get a lot of wonderful things done, such as these projects. So we hope to see more of you folks and the last of us.
Yeah, building on what Thomas has talked, Mr. Chair, back in February, we as a board got a report that highlights that our staff achieved the targets that are set out by Conservation Ontario about 95% of the time, which may be news to some. But that I think is pretty good, but maybe it isn't good enough. And, so maybe the desired targets are different. And that's why city is helping to fund a process improvement exercise that our staff are going to undertake with the guidance of a consultant. But in moving that forward, my understanding is that it's gone through at least some review at the city, but it's still being reviewed by another department. So it's going to be a while before the work actually starts and the changes are implemented. So building on Shauna's discussion about collaborating, Tracy, will you commit to the city having a seat at the table when reviewing the responses to the RFP when it ultimately gets out?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay. And Scott and Shauna, you let Tracy know who from the city you want to be involved in that. And in the meantime, I don't know for sure, but I sense that even more communication between an initial meeting in a development proposal, and later on to detailed design. Maybe there's something that can be done to speed things along and make the process better. So will you two commit to sitting down with our staff to talk about workflow matters? Or
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
I think we've officiated a marriage.
Yeah.
Sandy, I do.
Shana, I do. Tracy.
good, I'm glad to hear that because I think, kind of relating this to a report that's going to city committee later today.
Yeah.
That kind of maybe a little outdated with some of the provincial changes that have happened, but missed having the Upper Thames at that table. So I'm glad and I really don't, the past is the past, we can change the future. So what I'm hearing is opportunities to work better and to move things forward in a way that works well. So thank you both for committing to that. That's the last marriage I've ever been.
Well, congratulations on. I guess beyond the honeymoon,
No, it's gonna continue.
when have these, like Sandy referred to meetings and the interaction between the city and the conservation authority staff. I would stress it's important that there be some continuity in the key players of those meetings, like the people that were there at the start need to be there through the process and be there at the ends to ensure continuity of information and discussion. It's my only request or comment to that point. Thanks.
Is there any further questions? Seeing none, I want to thank you for being here. Your presence here today is a very good sign of come, and we very much appreciate that. And we'll consider the report next.
Thank you.
So with that, we will move on to item 6.1. If I'm reading my agenda correctly, I am. And that is the Mud Creek 2 zone concept, and I'll turn over to Tracy for comment.
Thank you. Through the chair. I just wanted to mention as well, while Jim Craigmile couldn't be here today, he certainly had questions and was very intrigued by this report as well. And he jumped right to some of the same conclusions we just heard from our delegation, is that, you know, this is a great opportunity when we're in this housing crisis, and why isn't this being done more often? And I think from what you've heard this morning, it is a very complex process, and not everywhere fits the requirements, especially when we're dealing with urban areas already. The focus of flood fringe areas are to be in those urban environments where we want to have concentrated growth and development. But also we're often constrained because of that is where existing homes and development are. So to undertake a large project like this, especially in the face, if this was entirely already developed out, you could just imagine some of the dollars already in addition to what you heard this morning. So certainly recognize that there's places for applying these types of policies, and that's why you don't see them as often. But as alluded to, there's areas in the Dingman perhaps where we might be seeing a little bit more of this, where those circumstances and flood fringe areas can be achieved. Again, looking at the depth and velocities of flooding, but still making sure that we're keeping new development safe. So just giving a little bit of background there. But certainly Jenna's here, and she's been working more closely in the last couple of years on this project as well. But again, this has been a lot of detailed work, not only with our planning and regulation staff, but also our engineering staff. These are very complex areas, and again, wanting to make sure that we are ensuring that new development is kept safe. Jenna has anything to add?
Sure, yeah, through you, Chair. I'll just add that I think what Tracy said is right. We can apply a two-zone concept like this to very specific areas that meet certain criteria. So just going back to what our core mandate is, which is protecting people and property and locating hazards like floodplains and keeping development out of them. So generally, our approach across the watershed is a one-zone approach. But we do have one area in Ingersoll where we have the two-zone concept applied, and now we're bringing forward this Mud Creek proposal. And the criteria to determine whether a two-zone is appropriate is set by the province. So it's laid out in appendix of the technical guide that's provided by the province. So after the city had completed all of the flood analysis and modeling work to support this project, the EA, we asked that they prepare this memo that would speak to all of those criteria that are set out by the province in that technical guide. So that's what's attached to the staff report that we provided that really provides the justification for why we can look at this area for a two-zone concept. So I do, in addition to what Tracy said, just want to acknowledge our staff efforts in all of this. It's been a lot of time obviously from the city, but from our staff as well. So our engineering staff, but our planning staff, Christine Cretin, has been primarily involved in this project, and Jessica Schnaithman has been our regulations officer on this. They're both here today. But they've spent a lot of time and effort reviewing, discussing, meeting, providing feedback to get us to this point. So I want to acknowledge their efforts. We're still working on some of the technical details and fine tuning, but I think our staff feel good that all of the work has been completed and the justification is there to apply this two-zone concept. And we certainly appreciate and acknowledge the city's efforts to improve the channel and flood conveyances in this area.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the report prior to a motion coming forward? You please.
The two zone concept, is this the first one, we've done?
No, Ingersoll's a leader on that one, but that was done many, many generations ago.
Oh, okay, and so then that's available to other municipalities, and they could, come forward with a project too?
Through the chair, certainly it has to meet some criteria for that to happen. And again, it has to be in those urban growth areas, so.
And my third
Certainly.
question is, liability. So we have, on our maps, a 250-year zone. And so now we're changing things. I understand there's technical reports and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, if somebody gets flooded after we've shortened that zone down, who's gonna be on the hook for that?
Yeah, certainly, there is still requirements for flood proofing. And to keep those areas safe and dry, as well as access requirements. But certainly when speaking to liability, I always turn to Grant, and maybe he can provide some insight.
Really? In a court, that's called an ambush. I think as long as we're within the parameters that you talked about, and we've done everything within reason, engineering wise, policy wise, project wise, our liability would be limited. I'm not saying zero, but our liability would be limited as long as we've followed everything that the engineers and our processes have said. It would be low. Would be low. But we could talk to our insurers.
And I would just add to that, we're in the game of risk management. So you can't control the weather, certainly. And so if you had a once in 300-year flood, there may be flooding. So again, this is trying to make sure that you're limiting the risk as much as possible, just like municipalities do throughout anything that we do. We try to limit the liability as much as possible, but there's always a risk. Tom and then Anna.
That's why we pay for those technical papers. For the insurance that's underwriting them.
Yeah, and just again, I think this is quite exciting and thanks again for the collaboration with the city and Upper Thames. We are going to be reviewing this area in about 10 years, from what I understand. So what are we hoping to see and gain? Maybe just following up on that liability conversation.
Who would like to answer that question?
Okay.
Jenna?
That's over to Jenna.
Through you, Chair. I think what we've learned through the Ingersoll 2 zone is that was an area that was approved by the province quite some time ago. And what we've seen is that area has not been reviewed, and development in that area, updated information from that area has certainly changed the 2 zone there. So we know internally some of the modeling information that we've generated that 2 zone concept is not very accurate anymore. And so with the 2 zone concept here, we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to review. And these concepts should be reviewed over time, because development as it moves forward is going to affect flood flows and conveyance. So we want to make sure there's that ability to review this concept over time.
Yeah, I want to build on that, Mr. Chair, and there's three recommendations here, and I want to focus on that last one, which deals with the review. So the way it reads is it's going to be reviewed in 10 years. And I'm wondering why that was selected, why not at least every 10 years, or based on some sort of trigger events or data events. I'm seeing Shauna nodding her head as well. It's like, is there a clearer way to set that out based on, I guess you're forecasting into the future what might change? We know development is going to take place in a variety of stages, likely. So is there a better way to make sure that we continue to do our job to keep property and people safe from flooding?
Jenna?
Through you, Chair, and obviously, Sandy, we've had some correspondence about this over the past few days. And I agree, and further down in the report, I had said at least every 10 years, so I think the recommendation could potentially be amended to allow for some more flexibility there. And I think, as I said before, based on our experience in Ingersoll, we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to review built into this. But I agree that there could be a better trigger than just every 10 years, and every 10 years may not be appropriate. So yeah, I think we could potentially revise the recommendation to, every 10 years, or as needed, or at least every 10 years as development comes forward.
Brian, is it fair to ask our guests if there's another wording that they would prefer? Or, I mean, I could right now make the amendment to say at least.
Well, the good thing is right now, is that there is no motion on the floor.
Yeah,
So that can be placed on a motion can be placed on the floor, stating, and then we can debate that item. If there's changes that want to be, but I think my view is on this is that reviewed every 10 years. I think you'd have to discuss every 10 years, what that review would look like, depending on, I think that's part of the process. So, I think that I would leave that in the capable hands of both sets of staff to be able to say, okay, what should that review be like every 10 years? It may be a comprehensive review. If there's a lot of stuff that happened, there's nothing that's happened, it'd be a very quick review. But if it's, I do agree that there should be some sort of, it's a good idea. And being from Ingersoll, we get a lot of, a lot of things have happened since that has taken place. And so you want to make sure that your stated goal is being met. And that any changes can be made in a duly time before things go too far, right? So does that help you at all, or?
yeah, I mean, I
I don't want to get too far into debating a motion.
No. At the time where there's a motion on the floor, I'm probably gonna move an amendment. So I'll do that and wait.
What I'll do is I'll commit to letting you move the motion,
Already.
and then there would be no amendment required.
Okay.
Excellent. Tom, please.
I'm just kind of struggling with this review because it's like. It's obviously we want to understand the hazards and part of that's the topography, but doesn't the development process require assessments of the hazard level, which is in essence is reviewing the feature on an ongoing basis? And if it requires remediation, would there not be, again, a technical assessment or an engineering assessment when there is an amendment to the feature as a storm drain?
And I think this is more pertaining to the two-zone concept and how that's working as a policy, as opposed to actual developments coming forward and seeing how they affect that area. It's just more of a general review of, because this is something it hasn't been tried in the city of London before. And so I guarantee that staff will put every resource into it to make sure that this is the best policy going forward, but reviewing whether that's working out as intended, more than the development that's happened on there and how it's affected, because that will happen through individual applications, correct?
It's also provincially regulated. Like we have, if it's a provincial tool, then we have to, and if the applicant meets the criteria, it wouldn't, that'd be kind of out of our control.
There may be a confusion between initiating a two-zone policy versus the planning applications coming forward that would allow such development in there. But maybe Tracy can expand.
Yeah, through you, Chair. It's much like official plan policies. It's good practice to review them every 5 years and update them after you've been implementing the policy for a number of years and realize there's some things that need refinement. Part of that is reflecting on new information and new data as development proceeds. The intent through all development processes is that is addressed at the time of the development, but again, it's just this opportunity to kind of look at it in a more comprehensive manner to make sure the policy objectives are being achieved.
It's quite possible that, these are all concepts right now. So as it gets built, there may be better data that's coming forward, and then those policies can be revised that could either limit or allow more development coming forward. So that review process would allow that to, you wouldn't want to have something that is safe for development be hung up because the policy hasn't been reviewed, and be able to move that forward. So I think that's
Yeah, I understand there's a requirement for flood proofing for any development in this modified zone. At this point, is there other restrictions on what type of development can take place in this area? Like, can you have single family housing or any type, in your presentation, you only talked about housing, but is there any opportunity for commercial or anything else in this area?
Anyone should speak to that?
I'm gonna defer to our regulations officer.
Hi, through the chair. I just want to say that, through the planning process, all the developments will be reviewed to make sure that they meet zoning and any appropriate, planning policies as well. And then they'll be reviewed through the section 28 permit process as well, just to make sure it's appropriate.
But at this point, there's no blanket that says this can be built, that can't be built. That's all to be determined as you go through the process. Okay.
We'll be following the policies that are outlined in the staff report.
Further questions? You're not, Sandy, you have a motion that you're.
Yeah, I'd like to move the first two recommendations as written. And under the section that says and further. Maybe to leave it as most flexible would be to add the words at least. To that third recommendation after the word reviewed. That it read that the two-zone concept within the Mud Creek subwatershed be reviewed at least every 10 years.
Okay, for us, for a second, for clarity, the recommendation would be that the UTRCA Board of Directors approve concept for a two-zone approach for a defined area within the Mud Creek subwatershed in the city of London, and that existing board approved policies for flood fringe and floodway be implemented for the area identified for the two-zone approach, and further that the two-zone concept within the Mud Creek subwatershed be reviewed at least every 10 years. Is that how the mover intended it?
Yes, it is.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Anna, discussion? Paul?
The question to Sandy is the intent of your change, rather than making it a 10-year locked in time period, that there'll be more flexibility to when these reviews take place, with the maximum being 10 years.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. That is the intent of the motion, and if it doesn't read that way, I'm happy to change it, because that's the intent.
That's my understanding of it,
Okay.
so you've achieved, at least in my mind.
Just a quick question to staff, or staff agreeable to that? Okay. Further discussion on the motion. Don, please.
How would this review be costed? Cause like, if there's no applicants, there's no fees. Would that come out of general operating funds?
Yeah, through the chair, we typically try to review our policies in a more comprehensive way on a regular basis. Again, as new provincial legislation and regulation happens, and we would be wanting to update it. I think we would just try to align a review of all of our policies in light of new information that comes forward through the development processes. Again, that's the intent, but if Jenna had any other further thoughts?
Or I wasn't clear on the question. I thought you were asking about the permit process. So all of the properties within the flood fringe will still require a section 28 permit. That wasn't the question. Okay.
About the review process or how the 10-year review would be funded.
Okay,
It's a policy review.
yeah.
How would it be funded, I think was the question, and I don't think Tom got an answer yet.
So maybe we can, if staff don't have that information right now, or just staff come back
I
and,
think it would be, yeah, as Tracy noted, part of our regular process of reviewing policy and yeah, if we would work in collaboration with the city, it may be part of an official plan update.
I would just add that typical policy level review when it's broader is through our general levy permits, because it's that ongoing piece. It's not necessarily a site specific application fee that we would be reimbursed from.
further discussion. Then, I just want to say this, I think we're we're at a point of history here that is very significant that, I don't know how everybody else was, but when this started, I was 4 years old. And so I want to commend everybody for sticking to it and working towards the final goal. I think we have a great example of collaboration here. This is extremely complex. Obviously, it's taken so long. We saw the drills that had to be used to make these things happen, and to be able to open up a piece of land for development, for housing, that is desperately needed. But that wouldn't happen without collaboration and cooperation. So I want to commend both parties for that. I certainly am supportive of this, and I'm certainly supportive of that going forward, as we heard today. The only way we move forward is if everybody's in the room and having those discussions. We do have responsibilities on both sides, and certainly allows others to take over afterwards and do those things that we need to reach our goals. So I look forward to what's going to come in the future. And I certainly agree with everybody that, yeah, those conversations need to happen. And we had a marriage today. That's probably something that never happens. But yeah, take that as a sign of goodwill. It's a good thing that when we all work together, whether it be the building community, thanks to Mr. Wallace for being here today, and the city staff as well. This is a good thing. It's going to move things forward. It's going to create, not only is it going to create safer areas for people to be, it's going to create recreation, it's going to create housing. So win-win-win. And yeah, it's a pretty proud moment. You can hear that both organizations really work together. Further, I'm sure our city councilors feel the same way. It's
Ditto.
so. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I'm just going to call for a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and okay.
There's another one of those.
Make a mess.
We'll call the meeting back to order. Thank you everyone for indulging that little break. We will, there is no reports in camera, so we will go down to reports for information. We'll start with 8.1, which is the section 28 status report. Are there any questions of that report? Seeing none, is there anything that staff would like to highlight? None either. Would anybody like to move the recommendation for a move? Sandy and Skylar? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then we'll go to 8.2, project status update. Get any questions of the report? Skylar, Paul?
Can you go to Paul first? I'm still playing it. Sorry, Paul, please.
Okay, I always appreciate this report with the chart that shows what's happening, where we're at. The one thing that's not on the chart, my question is about, was at the AGM a couple months ago, we passed a motion that a letter be sent to all the mayors within the watershed, asking for the report and lobbying to have the freeze on planning and development fees lifted. I just wonder where we are in that process.
So I can start with that one. Yesterday, and I'll get into more of my chair's comments, that Tracy and I were able to meet with the minister and face-to-face advocate for that. So, and then also I do want to have a conversation now that Mayor Morgan's through his budget process and has a little more free time, discuss that with him. I know he's very interested in advocating on behalf of that as well. So I will commit to reading that conversation this week. And then hopefully we can have that Tracy's.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for providing those comments and just echo that. But yeah, good reminder. I should add that to the list. In my mind, I can always think of the bigger projects, but yeah, that's one of the ones that have been on the to-do list as well.
Okay, so it's still in the process. It will happen
Yes.
in due time.
In due time. Skylar,
Mine was for item 8.4, so I was jumping ahead. It's on 8.2 as well. I'll save it.
always appreciate enthusiasm. Any other questions of the report? Was there anything that staff like that?
Just through the chair, as you can see, there's lots ongoing, and it's always great to have some completed items near the top as well. I do plan out, considering how busy our meetings are, and also have to consider staff vacation schedules as well to make sure that they're going to be in attendance. So you might always see a little bit of changes in the planned time for reporting. Again, having these on the list keeps them on everyone's radar so that we can bring them back in appropriate times.
Any further questions? Seeing none, is there a mover to receive the report? Mark and Scott, discussion? And I'll highlight that there's a lot on the go there, but it certainly reminds us to keep us organized. So I appreciate staff's time. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now I'll move 8.3, which is the proposed regulation minister's permit and review powers. And I'll turn that over to Tracy for comment.
Through the chair, thank you. And this is one of the new environmental registry postings. Came out April 5th. In a very short window for commenting as well. We heard from the minister yesterday that his intent is to use this power in very limited circumstances. And so hearing that was a little bit of a relief, I guess. But he was welcome to hearing feedback. We are setting up a meeting, I believe it's scheduled for Monday now, where ministry staff are available for answering any questions that have come about with conservation authorities and our general managers and regulation staff. So that's something that's just been scheduled as well. So I don't have a lot of information right now, but again, we always felt that the minister had that power to issue those permits, but now having a little bit more understanding of what circumstances would those powers be enacted, if we could have that clarity.
And so I did ask the minister the question as to why they felt they needed the powers for this. And he statement that it will be used for timing issues of things that were of great needed to move quickly. So it was not a be-all catch-all. But that's the statement that was given for the minister behind the reasoning and why he would use those powers. But again, they're certainly open to reviewing, and it was a good conversation.
They seem to be doing this with almost every update they do, like even the agricultural research farms. Now the minister can make it a direction. And I think it's in line with strong mayor's powers, right? Like having public officials or politicians able to act opposed to being dependent on functionaries. I think that's the ideology behind this.
He did also mention that, you know, it would still be based off of, you know, these decisions would be based off of criteria and the safety, and so those things are not being discounted. So there was some relief in the room when those statements were made, that it would still be based off the decision-making criteria that's around what's basically enforced right now, but basically just used for timing issues. If that's the only example he could think of that he would use those powers. Sandy and then Paul.
Through the chair to staff, there were some announcements last week as well. One of which related to ministerial zoning orders. Is that any connection to this piece? Or is that still, because there were so many different announcements, we haven't had time to do the analysis?
Yeah, through the chair, that is exactly it. My radar's been more on those ones that are specifically related to our permitting responsibilities. But yes, I think there is, again, another suite, but I have not looked at the zoning orders one. Again, I think it's providing some additional clarity and context for when and why those matters would be issued under a zoning order and a minister's direction, for example. And again, what constitutes a provincial interest, because those are supposed to be kind of the test for what that is.
Related to that, though, one of the postings, and it's only open till mid-May, that's on the ERO, were changes to the provincial policy statement, including changing the name. But I'm hoping staff and CEO have an opportunity to comment on them before the deadline, because again, for some significant changes, it's as narrow a window as that's allowed.
And if I could through the chair, this is a posting of the provincial planning statement. I'm still going to call it the provincial policy statement. That's ingrained in my head, but with the new PPS, some of the refinement and wording, general discussion with some of my counterparts at CAs, we're fairly appreciative of the changes and clarifications that have been added. For example, in the natural hazards chapter, no longer sections, it does speak to the responsibilities of planning authorities to collaborate with conservation authorities to identify natural hazards. So again, having that collaboration is mentioned in this, the delegation this morning is more important than ever. And I think really, for conservation authorities to be specifically mentioned in that section of the planning statement now is a great clarity to be providing. So seeing some positives coming from the more recent updates that have been posted. So.
Oh, if you don't want to answer this question, I'll understand, but given the strong and recent history of this minister in municipal politics, you get a greater sense of cooperation with municipalities and conservation authorities than what we've seen in the last few years from officials.
Through the chair, I'll start, but I'm sure Brian will have some comments to add as well. I think yesterday's meeting, it was primarily with some of the higher growth conservation authorities throughout the province with the minister and ministry staff. Really was an open discussion to obtain some of the feedback and how conservation authorities feel how the changes may have helped and some of the challenges that we faced. And again, just re-emphasizing that we're very hopeful this is the start of many discussions, so that there could be better understanding and how willing the conservation authorities are to provide insight before new regulation is passed. Because there might be some tweaking of regulation that would have made for additional clarity for implementation. Many of the changes that we're seeing, we recognize are good. We just didn't like the timelines for implementation. But having our watershed strategies, for example, having the land management strategies, asset management for our infrastructure, they're all good things. Just getting them done within the timelines provided, as well as these more recent regulations changes under Section 28, having them announced and then implemented April 1st, 6 weeks later. That's a tight timeline. So just giving us a little bit more time and perhaps some more conversations in advance of regulatory changes that affect us would be a benefit for everyone. So that message seemed to be well received.
Also out of that, let's face it, when these regulations first came out, or the change to the Conservation Authority Act, there was no consultation whatsoever. They just happened. So having a minister invite a group of high growth area CAs to the table to have a discussion is a very good positive change. And I will say that Minister Smith was very open to the good, the bad, and to having that feedback be brought forward. I think people at the table did a very good job of emphasizing the need for this to continue, and then it's a welcome sign. So I think there is some change in the way that the government is proceeding with items. And so I commend them for that. It is a positive to have that feedback. The message that was, we want to be at the table, much similar to the message was this morning. The earlier we're at the table, we can try to implement these things easier and faster, because some of the bad things that came out of it was trying to implement these policies was actually, in some cases, slowing it down because of the way they were brought out. So again, having that, I commend the minister for having that meeting and wanting the feedback. He seemed like he truly did want to have the feedback and was very engaged.
That's encouraging because in the 5 years I've sat around this table, the relationship has been very adversarial with them having all the power and us having to kowtow to whatever they wanted. So it's very encouraging that the minister is moving towards consultation as opposed to imposing things as they've done in the last few years.
Any further question? Do we have a mover and a seconder for this? I'll ask for one. Mover and a seconder. George and Sandy, please. This further discussion on this? None. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we'll move to 8.4, which is hydro plant update. Update on that.
Yes, through the chair, just noted that the hydro plant update is the one that's been on the project update list for a while. It was overdue. We've had some staff changing and being able to bring something forward now to say where we are in the process. Certainly Chris can provide a little bit more of detail if he'd like. Putting over to him. I don't see Dan in the room.
Dan wasn't able to join us, and I'm available if there are questions.
Any questions in the report? Skylar.
Just want to say thank you very much for bringing it forward. I was curious with, doing this next steps and then trying to figure out what the problem is and what the resolution is. If at the point when you're doing kind of a cost benefit analysis of doing the repairs or any changes, if at that point you'll be seeking, federal or provincial or other sources of funding as well, like incorporating that into the cost benefit analysis.
For the chair, that's something that we're always looking for, and sometimes it's more readily available than others. Chris, if you had any ideas of some of the costs right now.
Until we actually get to the point of understanding what the problem is and what the possible solutions are.
Thank you.
And then Paul.
I'm just curious, I think we were told at some point it's somewhere between like 50 to 150 homes that it has the capacity to generate, and that there are some issues with the local grid and consumption of that type of, or that volume of power. Part of generating supply is also marrying that with demand, and I wonder if there's any benefit in looking at potential end users as outside of just our own needs in this facility, and to have a full potential business case as to whether the feasibility of the repairs are worth, if the juice is worth the squeeze.
Staff comment on the current, is it currently hooked to the grid, I imagine?
I'll do my best to try and wander through that process, but the, so what is generated is used first and foremost at the dam and this building. Anything additional that's generated is put out to the grid. So it is providing power to beyond just our own facilities. One of the ways which we previously enjoyed was the ability to wheel the power added to the grid against what we were using in other facilities. That was lost when we provided it through the London Hydro grid. Now, that is something that we can consider when we're looking beyond just getting the plant running, is what the opportunities are to try and engage London Hydro and others in the discussion around what we get back for what we sell it for. Basically, it's far more economical to be able to offset our usage, which you pay more than you get, basically, right? So that is something to consider, and of course, with agreements coming due and all that sort of thing, it'll be a good time to negotiate what we can get for it, and that enters into the cost benefit analysis as well. So there's a number of factors. We even looked at building our own infrastructure to wire it over to the park, basically, and that's our challenge, is the park is fed from a different part of the London Hydro grid than we supply out of this end. I don't know whether that fully addressed your questions.
The first step in many of possible steps, but I guess to me, the first step is, we gotta make sure that you understand what the cost is to have the unit repaired so it can produce, and then if you have a cost benefit after that, maybe.
Am I correct in hearing there's no grid capacity issues?
Sorry, the question was, if he's correct, there's no grid capacity issues.
As far as the grid being able to receive the power, no, there's no issues with that. Yeah.
Two-part question, Chris. Is the fan shop plant the only one we have in the watershed? And how long has it been shut down?
It's 5 years. Yes, it's the only one. That was the easy question. How long it's been shut down? It's been a few years.
At least 5, Chris.
Yeah, it's prior to COVID, before we were challenged with things. Yeah, it's been down for a while.
Further. Seeing none, is there a mover for the recommendation? You and Tom, discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we'll go to 8.5, which is the former Children's Safety Village. Is there any questions of that report? Seeing none, and we do have a presentation, so.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, board members, and staff members. And I will be providing you with a progress report to the Children's Safety Village. My name is Michael Knox, and I'm the property superintendent here at the authority. Next slide, Emma. Let's back things up a little bit before we move forward with the visual presentation of progress. Let's acknowledge the past and go back to the Children's Safety Village prior to roughly the year 2000, and through external partners and the concepts for the London area, CSV was developed Children's Safety Village. Throughout Ontario, safety villages or villages are located in Belleville, Durham, Saugeen, Waterloo, Essex Region, Windsor, Niagara. The village or villages are a community resource used primarily for the teaching to elementary school students by EMS, fire, and police. Specific safety topics include fire, home, traffic, road, railway, as key examples. So for almost 20 years, that program ran within Fanshawe use area. In 2021, the Upper Thames concluded the 20-year land lease agreement with the village. In 2022, at the end of 2022, we received the building from the Children's Safety Village in Wine Village. In 2023, January to August, the facility was used for various authority functions and events and rented to the YMCA during the summer months of June, July, and August for their summer day camp program. 2023, September to December, facility staff implemented the operations plan to prepare. This is a quick visual of the before. This is day one. Next slide. So the cleanup begins. Staff's target was to identify the infrastructure requirements to restore the aging vacant building to a baseline staff could envision and utilize future use. These are some of the major projects that were completed, again, from September to December 31st, 2023. This also includes various minor projects on the building. This is during, again, September to December 31st. Roughly rough count of 11 plus contractors, City of London staff, commitment, fire department involved in preparing the building. What would that get us? 60 plus projects, renovation and improvements. Gives us 2,000 visitors for the London and Middlesex Children's Water Festival. It gives us 600 plus visitors for the grade 3 to 6 students for the STEM programming. Visitors for celebrating natural connections. This is a visual representation of after some of the program that's being currently done. Now, let's go back to our target, which was to get the facility to a baseline so we could assist staff in envisioning and realizing future uses. These are our next steps. Work is not done. The facility has attained those basic operational targets. And now you can see these are outlined below. A few of the identified high-level projects moving forward. These projects will assist with the functionality, the flexibility, and adaptability in the facility's direction, offering an opportunity to share and develop a space that we can welcome the community and further our mission of inspiring a healthy environment. Staff continue to meet and plan in all areas, scope and/or identify proper value or purposeful value to the projects. Again, potential uses for the building continue to be narrowed and scoped to the viability in several of the UTRCA's programs and services, including community partnerships and community education programming. and or recreational use or rental facilities. Next slide. Again, more visual. What's in a name? I think we're to the point where the Children's Safety Village does not accurately reflect the building. So we've reached out to staff as a starter, initiate. We've also talked internally within our working group. So what works, what doesn't work, what has that match for the future uses. So that's just a quick snapshot of the operations that we've completed and kind of the next steps. Are there any questions or comments?
Mark, please.
Just wondering about the immediate future, Mike. Is the YMCA, for example, for summer camps committed to 2025 or beyond for summer camps?
So they're committed, but in a different location within the day use area, or a different facility within the day use area.
Further questions? Sandy and then Paul, please.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, lots has been done since we've taken this on, so much appreciated. And I'm pretty sure, but want to double check, this has all been done with existing staff. I mean, there's no additional staffing that have been required to do all this amazing work.
Yeah, through the chair. It's certainly our staff, but we have had contractors.
Oh,
for some of the
yeah, of course.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, yes. but
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're existing staff and complement to do the upgrades of painting, some of the minor maintenance activities, and then contractors where needed.
Yeah, because I know that's always been a concern of the board, particularly after the budget. That we're able to accommodate this that way, I think is important.
Paul, please.
Mike, the slide that had next steps was a whole list of things to do there.
Yes.
You have costs for it of those steps, and were those costs included in the budget for 2024, or are they to come in the future?
I will answer as much as I can, and I may defer to Brent Berkshire for further explanation. Are some of them costs available to us right now currently? Yes. Are some being scoped and evaluated? Yes. Were some identified for the 2024 operating season? Correct, yes.
Yes, through the chair to your question, Paul, there was a line item, a capital budget line item that was included in the 2024 budget that did include a number of these projects. To the best of our forecasting ability, knowing what these projects would end up costing. So there's some flexibility in that capital line, but those were the projects that we're looking at implementing. Also taking advantage of any funding opportunities that we have out there currently and any funding opportunities that will be out there in the future.
So most of that has been budgeted for this year? Almost or all?
Yes. Now there's with the caveat that the fiber optic installation has a few different moving parts there. There could be an added cost depending on where we get that fiber from. There's current infrastructure that comes through our lands out towards the Fanshawe Pioneer Village that we're working collaboratively with those folks to see if we can, if there's any available strands, if we can tie into that infrastructure. And it'll be a small extension of the infrastructure from the village. Now, if there isn't any fiber that's available from that part, then we would look to plan B or option B, which would be bringing it off of Fanshawe Park Road. So that cost will ultimately impact that line item. And from there, we'll determine what projects are priority and what needs to be implemented so that we can get into the building and start using it. That's the key piece, is getting that connectivity in there so staff can use the building properly and adequately. Thank you.
Sorry, in addition to that, there are staff have applied for future grants or several different grants that are available to us for the technology, for the
Yeah, I noticed in your report, you said there was a demolition of 25 small accessory building structures. Did we send out thank you letters to any of those mini pharmacies and all those little kind of buildings that were all in there that had source of sponsorship acknowledgements to them? Just to sort of say, here's the update, here's what's going on, and unfortunately, or whatever, Shoppers Drug Mart or whoever was part of it, but the little village, all those little stores, these, at some point in time, they must have paid something to as a sponsorship to be in there.
So we did scope that exercise and wondered if we should. We did not. Many of the buildings were beyond condemned stage, and it was very much a disrepair. So we did not, but would they have come to us when the program was running between 2000 and 2018, they would approach the village and do those repairs. We hadn't heard of any of the outside sources, external partners. They never approached us, so we did not go to them, but the buildings were in a condition assessment was fairly poor.
Just to clarify, the building maintenance responsibilities with the sponsorship. And then we've got to a point where that willingness to maintain those buildings was lacking and hence we had got to the state where they had to be removed.
As I understand, yeah. And under volunteer repairs time.
Yes, if I may just add to Mike's comments there through the chair, that was part of the Safety Village's challenges through COVID, was being able to reach out to those that had those commitments and sponsorships in the rear of the building there. And through COVID, the in-person programming came to a halt, and those sponsorships really didn't find the value in continuing those sponsorships with the village, and that was part of the challenge that they experienced and ultimately how we acquired the building, so.
Tom and then Paul.
Thank you for your report. A lot of progress, excellent work. Look forward to your business plan.
And to the point about the maintenance of the buildings, I was a firefighter at the time this project was initiated, and many firefighters donated towards it, and it was presented as a one-time proposal. There was nothing there about ongoing maintenance of these buildings.
Further questions? Seeing none, as a remover and a seconder for Skylar and Anna. Further discussion? Well, thanks staff for providing the update, and there's been a lot of work done and there's a lot of exciting things to come. For that discussion, none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we'll move on to item 8.6. which is the land acquisition. And Tracy, would you like to give any highlights?
Yeah, no, I think I'll pass it over to Brett and Brandon if they would like to say a few words about this report. Another good news story.
Yeah, through the chair, just this is the second land acquisition that we've been involved in the last year. To get these properties, you know, in our portfolio of land holdings is unique, I'll say, because of this type of property. This one here, unlike the previous property acquisition, this was actually a donation. So the landowner had owned this property for somewhere in 25 or 30 years. The Conservation Authority in late 2022, and through the process end of 22 and 23, we were discussing back and forth. You'll get package completed for the property. So really, it's just amazing to get this type of land, especially the size of it, 34 hectares or 85 acres or so of woodland right along Fish Creek, complements our property. Basically just next door to the east. So we will be doing a media release with the previous owners in the coming weeks here, but just a great opportunity to acquire amazing piece of property. We've already had 2 instances of species at risk on the property as well this year. Snapping turtle and spiny softshell are right in Fish Creek, right along the property.
Questions from the board on? Seeing none, is there a mover and a seconder to receive it? Paul, Scotty? Discussion? So I think this is a great news story, and I think all the work that staff have gone into this. Certainly, partners at Canada Nature Fund, Environment Canada, and Climate Change Canada, once again have come through with some great funding to help us reach our goals. So appreciate that as always. Further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we'll move to last, but certainly not least, under 8.8. For information, and that's the Thames River Current. Addition?
Video.
I don't eat myself. So.
I'm jumping ahead now.
So, is there any, it's just there for information. We received that? Yep. Is there a mover and a second to receive that? Mark and Sandy? Is there any discussion on that? Says that everyone to share as much as possible. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. We do have under reports from committee updates. There's one there from the finance and from the hearings committee, which we did meet on March 26th, and the information is there. Is there any questions of that? Is there a mover and a seconder to receive that report as information? Dean and Paul? Discussion on that? None, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Are there any notice of motions? Seeing none, we'll go to chair's comments. Tracy, Dean and myself were able to head to Conservation Ontario meeting yesterday in Toronto. A lot of good information coming out. There was an election of a new board, and then there was some good information coming out of a couple of things to highlight. Is one of those was the report on the Section 28 reporting. And so in 2022, it went from under the provincial standard from 91% to 95% this year, which is a 4% increase. And then under the CO's standards, which are even tighter, it went from 84% to 89%, which is a 5% increase. So there's constant improvement there, which is very good to see and share with our partners. Say that the conservation authorities are listening and improving at all times to try to make sure those necessary permits are getting issued. I gotta commend Conservation Ontario. They're really showing their value coming out of COVID. Everything was shut down, and so those moments that they really shine at, we're kind of dulled a little bit. But their ability to get funding, which again just was able to be used for they were stewards of the funding to be able to use to purchase the Wheeler property, to be able to do the advocacy work, and to be able to do the training, and is really showing now. Again, staff will now have a meeting next Monday again, where they'll be able to sit around and with ministry staff and be able to give input. So one of the very big highlight yesterday was their ability to arrange a meeting with the minister. And so they put us all on the bus and they took us to Queen's Park, where we had an hour and a half to talk with the minister. And so it was greatly appreciated that way. Again, I must commend the minister for having that meeting and being open. I did advocate on we had a little thing that we're trying to advocate for, to try to make sure it got on the table. And mine was the fee freeze. The minister was hesitant, although others expressed their interest in that as well. And so he did ask if we had evidence for a change in that he would be willing to look at that. So again, that's where our letter comes in and provide as much information as possible to try to make sure that hopefully by the end of the year, that can be taken off the table and be allowed to operate. Some of the other conservation authorities at the table are upwards of 80, 90, 100% cost recovery. Some have letters from their municipalities stating they need to be at 100% cost recovery. We're at a much lower level, so we're starting that trend upward. So it's very important for these things to happen across the table. And I think the minister, like I said, hesitant, but he was open to everything that was brought forward. Certainly, it was a productive meeting, I think. Dean got to experience his first Conservation Ontario meeting. Anything you'd like to highlight from that?
No, just a good experience to see what happens in the bigger picture through the province. So it's all good.
There was a case of mistaken identity where his approach has said, "Oh, you're going to be vice chair," and I'm like, I don't remember that. So it was solved, and luckily I was not more responsibility. So with that, I will turn it over to other members' comments.
Just have a reminder for Michelle not to forget her steel-toed boots and her digging gloves. The Woodstock Community Tree Planting Day is on Saturday, April the 27th at 8:30 a.m. over on Tamarack Street, which is part of the Burgess Park, upper part of the trail, and Burgess Park there along the Thames River.
Further comments? It is, I guess we'll highlight too, it's the Thames River cleanup season again as well. So if anybody wants to get out, I know Ingersoll's is April 20th, as long as the rain holds off. So if anybody wants to share other ones in the community, try to participate in that as well. And I'll turn it over to Tracy for general manager's comments.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and through you. Just wanted to highlight, yeah, it's a busy time of year. We do have a list of events that I'm sure we can circulate to the members. There's lots going on. We just shared it at our full staff meeting on Friday. And it was a lengthy list, and that only went up to July. So lots of activities and ways to participate, and I'd encourage you all to do so. As well, an update on our parks. We're getting close to opening season. I know the gates opening right now for the shoulder season. You'll have your window mirror hangers, I should say, on display. But I think we're very fortunate and happy to report that we had a lot of returning summer staff this year. So I know through COVID, hiring was always a bit of a challenge and having some continuity, but the hiring this year, Justin, our HR tells us it's gone quite smoothly because of having so many staff and having that experienced staff in place and enjoying their experience from last summer and wanting to return, I think says a lot about our organization. So that it's one of those things that makes me proud. Of course, we're still seeing the tail end of some of these regulatory changes, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, with regulations and planning policy. We'll be providing comment again for Conservation Ontario. There are facilitators, I would say, to ensure that all conservation authorities have an opportunity and a mechanism to collaborate and provide one voice as a representative of the very different CAs across the province, but bringing those comments together to make those responses on the ERO postings. So that will continue to happen as well. So yeah, just thought I'd highlight a few of the things that are going on right now. Yeah, look forward to some more beautiful weather to get out and enjoy these events and activities.
Well, with that, we've reached the end of our agenda, so I will call for adjournment. Tom and Skylar. All in favor? Thank you, everybody.